The Buffalo Creek disaster, a story of corporate negligence, 125 deaths, and zero accountability. A hollow morning. It is 8 a.m. on February 26, 1972, and the 16 small mining communities strung along Buffalo Creek Hollow in Logan County, West Virginia, are beginning their Saturday. In Saunders, a woman hangs laundry on a line strung between two coal company houses. In Laredo, a group of children chase a dog through the mud. In Man, the largest town in the Hollow, men gather at a diner, drinking coffee, talking about the mine. Most of them work for the Pittston Company, one of the largest coal operators in Appalachia. Their fathers work for Pittston. Their grandfathers work for someone like Pittston. The mountains are all they have ever known. The creek running through the hollow is black from coal waste. It is always black. Nobody thinks much about it. By 8:01 a.m., a wall of black water, mud, and coal sludge 3 stories high will be moving through this valley at 30 miles per hour. By the end of the morning, 125 people will be dead. Over 1,000 homes will be destroyed. 4,000 survivors will be left with nothing but the clothes on their backs, standing in the wreckage of every community they had ever known. Buffalo Creek Hollow will cease to exist. The geography of entrapment. To understand what happened here, you need to understand where these people lived and why that geography gave them no chance. Buffalo Creek is not a creek in any generous sense. It is a narrow, steep-walled hollow carved into the mountains of southern West Virginia, barely wide enough in places for the road, the creek, and a row of houses to exist side by side. The mountains rise sharply on both sides, dense with trees, unclimbable in winter mud. 16 communities sat in that hollow, one after another like beads on a string. Saunders, Lundale, Stowe, Latrobe, Laredo, Craneco, Amherstdale, Becko, Robinette, Brayholme, Kistler, Kreitz, Fanco, Pardee, Henlawson, and Man, a combined population of roughly 5,000 people. There was one road in and one road out. The mountains allowed no escape to the sides. Anyone in that hollow when the water came had nowhere to go but up, and the water moved faster than any person could climb. The people who lived here did not choose geography carelessly. They lived where the coal company told them to live, in company-owned houses, on company-owned land, in a company-owned hollow. 14 miles up that hollow, Pittston had been building a different kind of structure for years. The dam that was not a dam. The Pittston Company needed somewhere to put its coal waste. Coal mining produces enormous quantities of material that cannot be sold. Rock, dirt, and a fine black slurry called coal refuse, or gob. For decades, Pittston had been piling this waste across the head of Buffalo Creek Hollow, creating a series of massive earthen impoundments. By 1972, there were 3 of them stacked one behind the other. The largest, Dam 3, was 60 feet high, 500 feet wide, and held back an artificial lake of 132 million gallons of black coal slurry. Here is what is essential to understand. Pittston did not consider this structure a dam. Internally, company documents described it as a refuse pile. This was not a semantic accident. Under West Virginia law in 1972, dams required permits, engineering inspections, and safety certifications. Refuse piles required almost nothing. By calling their dam a pile of garbage, Pittston avoided every safety regulation that might have required them to build it properly. The structure had no engineered core, no proper spillway, no discharge system. It was coal waste stacked on top of more coal waste, with water pooling behind it. Engineers who understood earthen dam construction would have recognized it immediately for what it was, a catastrophe waiting for rain. And it had been raining for days. the warnings they ignored. The residents of Buffalo Creek Hollow were not surprised by what the dam was. They were terrified of it. For years, local miners had watched the Black Lake grow larger behind that unstable wall of coal waste. They could see the water creeping higher after every rain. They could see the refuse pile sagging, saturated, dark with moisture. As early as 1967, miners had written formal complaints to the West Virginia Department of Natural Resources, warning that the impoundment was dangerous. State inspectors visited, noted concerns, and left without requiring substantive changes. In 1968, a smaller impoundment upstream failed, sending a surge of black water and debris into the hollow. Nobody died, but the hollow flooded. Pittston repaired the smaller dam and continued building Dam 3 larger. The U.S. Bureau of Mines had jurisdiction over coal refuse piles. Inspectors visited Buffalo Creek in the years before the disaster. Their reports noted the impoundment's precarious condition. They had the authority to order improvements. They did not. In January 1972, just 5 weeks before the disaster, a Bureau of Mines inspector visited and found the dam satisfactory. He noted that water was dangerously close to the top of the impoundment. He recommended minor drainage improvements. He did not order them. He did not shut the operation down. On the evening of February 25th, Pittston's own on-site manager, a man named Steve Dasovich, inspected the dam and found water lapping within inches of the top. He was worried. He called company officials. He was reportedly told that the dam had survived before and would hold. It would not hold. The morning it failed. February had brought relentless rain to Logan County. The streams were swollen. The ground was saturated. Every waterway in the hollow was running high and dark. By 7 a.m. on February 26th, water was running over the top of Dam 3. For an earthen structure built from loose coal refuse, overtopping is a death sentence. Water moving across the surface of compacted waste begins to carve into it immediately. The saturated material beneath offers almost no resistance. At approximately 8 a.m., the face of Dam 3 collapsed. 132 million gallons of black coal slurry, thick, heavy, dense with suspended solids, far more destructive than clean water, exploded through the breach and began moving down the hollow. It picked up the remains of the two smaller dams above it as it went. It picked up everything. The wave that formed was described by survivors as a wall of black mud and debris, 3 stories high in places, moving at speeds later estimated between 20 and 30 miles per hour. It carried whole houses, trucks, trees, railroad cars, and the bodies of the dead and dying all tangled together. The people of Buffalo Creek Hollow had almost no warning. The hollow offered no view of what was coming until it was already there. The roar some survivors described hearing lasted only seconds before the wave arrived. There was nowhere to run. 16 communities in minutes. The wave consumed the hollow, community by community, in order, in minutes. Saunders was gone almost instantly, then Lundale, then Stowe and Latrobe. Each community obliterated before the next had meaningful warning. The telephone lines went down immediately. The road was gone. There was no way to call ahead, no way to warn neighbors half a mile downstream. In Laredo, survivors described watching their neighbors' houses slide past them on the wave while they scrambled up muddy hillsides on their hands and knees. Some made it. Some fell back into the current. In Amherstdale, a woman later testified that she watched her husband swept away through a window before the water took her too. She survived by grabbing a tree branch. Her husband did not survive at all. In Lundale, an entire family of 8, parents, grandparents, children, was erased. Neighbors who lived 50 feet away on slightly higher ground survived without a scratch. The wave reached the community of Man, the largest town in the hollow, within approximately an hour. By then it had slowed, widened, and dropped much of its heaviest debris, but it still destroyed hundreds of homes and killed people in the streets. When it was over, 16 communities had been struck. 12 were effectively destroyed. 125 people were confirmed dead. More than 1,000 homes were gone. 4,000 people, virtually the entire population of the Hollow, were left homeless on a February morning in the mountains of West Virginia. The black sludge that coated everything did not wash away easily. It smelled of chemicals and coal. It clung to the ruins of houses, to the surviving trees, to the bodies that recovery workers spent days pulling from the debris. The survivors. The people who survived Buffalo Creek did not escape cleanly. Many wished in the weeks and months that followed that they had not survived at all. Psychiatrist Robert J. Lifton and sociologist Kai Erikson were brought in to study the affected community in the aftermath. What Erikson documented would become a landmark study in the sociology of disaster. He coined the term collective trauma, partly in response to what he witnessed at Buffalo Creek. What the survivors experienced was not simply grief or post-traumatic stress in the individual sense. The entire community had been destroyed. The social fabric that held these people together, neighbors who had known each other for generations, church congregations, the daily rhythms of community life, had been obliterated in minutes. Survivors reported that they could no longer sleep. They could not be near running water. They could not tolerate the sound of rain. Children who had been in school on a normal Friday morning woke up Saturday to find that their homes, their neighborhoods, and sometimes their families no longer existed. The Buffalo Creek survivors were relocated to trailer camps provided by Pittston. Neighbors who had lived side by side for decades were assigned to different camps miles apart. The company, perhaps inadvertently, perhaps not, had finished what the flood began, scattering what remained of these communities so they could not even grieve together. The responsible party. The Pittston Company moved quickly after the disaster. Within days, a company spokesperson told reporters that the flood had been caused by an act of God, citing the heavy rainfall as the primary factor. The phrase would echo through the legal proceedings that followed for years. The facts told a different story. Pittston had built an unengineered coal waste impoundment with no proper spillway, no discharge system, and no structural core. They had classified it as a refuse pile specifically to avoid dam safety regulations. Their own managers had seen the water cresting the top the night before the failure and had not evacuated the hollow. State and federal regulators had inspected the structure and failed to order meaningful remediation. The state of West Virginia launched an investigation. The federal government launched an investigation. The results were unambiguous. The dam had been negligently constructed and negligently maintained. The failure was not a natural disaster. It was a man-made one. In 1972, the state of West Virginia filed a $100 million lawsuit against Pittston on behalf of survivors. The company fought it for years. A group of survivors, represented by attorney Gerald Stern, also filed a class action lawsuit. Pittston's legal team initially offered $1 million to settle all claims, roughly $8,000 per destroyed home, for a company that had reported profits of $40 million the previous year. Survivors refused. After years of litigation, Pittston settled the survivors' class action lawsuit in 1974 for $13.5 million. Given that more than 4,000 people had been left homeless and 125 had been killed, the settlement amounted to roughly $3,300 per survivor. No Pittston executive was ever criminally charged. No individual was ever held personally liable. The company paid a civil fine to the state of West Virginia of $1 million, approximately what the Pittston Company earned in profit every 9 days that year. The phrase "act of God" never entirely disappeared from the proceedings. The reckoning that never came. In the years following Buffalo Creek, the disaster did produce some concrete change, more than Johnstown ever did. The Federal Dam Safety Act, passed in 1977, established a national program for dam inspection. The Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act, also passed in 1977, created new regulations for coal waste impoundments and gave the federal government clearer authority to enforce safety standards at mining operations. These were real reforms. They almost certainly saved lives in the decades that followed, but none of them brought back 125 people. None of them rebuilt communities that had been not merely damaged, but culturally erased. Kai Erickson, in his book about Buffalo Creek, published in 1976, argued that what Pittston had destroyed could not be compensated with money, even if the company had tried. The social world these people inhabited, the relationships, the rhythms, the sense of belonging, was gone as completely as the houses. Many Buffalo Creek survivors never rebuilt their lives in the hollow. The communities that had existed there for generations did not reconstitute. The hollow itself is quieter today, dotted with the remnants of what were once thriving, if hardscrabble, mining communities. The Pittston Company continued operating. In 1989 and 1990, Pittston became the subject of a major strike by the United Mine Workers, one of the longest and most bitter labor actions in late 20th century American history, partly over safety conditions in its mines. The company eventually merged with Brinks, the armored car company, and the Pittston name disappeared from corporate letterhead entirely. None of the executives who made the decisions that killed 125 people in Logan County, West Virginia, ever served a day in prison. None of them, so far as the public record shows, ever issued a personal apology to the families of the dead. What remains? There is a Buffalo Creek Memorial in Logan County today. The names of the 125 dead are inscribed on it. Many of the survivors are gone now themselves, carried off by the ordinary passage of time. But some remain, and the ones who do have given interviews over the decades. And they say similar things. They say they still cannot watch heavy rain without feeling the fear return. They say the phrase, "act of God," still makes them angry 50 years later. They say they knew, even in 1972, even as children, that the black lake behind the refuse pile was going to come down eventually. They were just never believed. And the people who did not believe them, the company officials, the state inspectors, the federal regulators, paid no meaningful price for the choice. Gerald Stern, the attorney who represented the survivors, later wrote a book about the case. He titled it The Buffalo Creek Disaster. In it, he described arriving in Logan County in the weeks after the flood and seeing for the first time what corporate negligence looks like when it is fully accomplished. Not a spreadsheet entry, not a legal liability, but 125 bodies and 4,000 people with nowhere to sleep. The company called it an act of God, one survivor said in an interview decades later. But God didn't build that dam out of garbage and call it a refuse pile so they wouldn't have to get a permit. Men did that. And those men ate dinner that night and slept in their beds.